Today we're going to take a look at Elementary OS. This is often considered to be one of the best Linux distros for beginners, so I'm going to keep that in mind during this review. We'll be wanting to keep an eye out for a very simplistic and user-friendly download, installation, and use. So to download Elementary OS, you want to navigate to elementary.io, or you can simply Google download Elementary OS. As you can see, their main webpage is very clean and simplistic. This main page is also the download page, and Elementary comes with a download option that may seem confusing if you haven't seen something like this before. This OS is, of course, free software, but you have the option of paying what you want if you'd like to help the developers. But if you don't want to pay anything, though, you can simply enter 0 as the dollar amount that you want to pay, and this link will change from a purchase button to a download button. Now, it actually hasn't changed yet in my browser because I am blocking JavaScript, which is something that personally I don't really like about this website, is the fact that you have to have JavaScript be enabled in order for you to download the ISO. It's really not necessary to have JavaScript enabled to download an ISO. Plenty of other websites work without it, like Ubuntu.com, for example. But yeah, you can enter 0, and you see it changes to download Elementary OS when we have JavaScript enabled. And you can also download the ISO regularly as the file, or you can click this to do it with a magnet link and download it torrent style, which I really enjoy. But I've actually got it downloaded to my computer already. So now we're going to move over to VirtualBox where we do the installation. And as always, this will work. The steps to install it in VirtualBox are the same way for installing it to hardware. The only difference is that instead of following the steps to make a virtual machine that I'm about to show you, you want to first flash it to a USB stick and then boot from that USB stick by changing the boot order in your BIOS, and then after that, all the installation steps will be the same. So inside of VirtualBox, I'm going to click New, and I'm going to call it Elementary OS. And the type, I'm going to select Linux, and the version, I'm going to do Ubuntu 64-bit, since Elementary OS is based off of Ubuntu. Memory size, I'm going to crank this up to 6 gigs, but this isn't actually necessary. You could boot Elementary OS off of a system that only has 4 gigs of RAM, so 6 gigs not necessary. Even 2 gigs, you could boot it, but that would be a little bit on the lower end for something like this, since it's not a super minimalist distro that only comes with a window manager. And then we want to create, and I'm going to give it 30 gigs of hard disk space, and I'm going to make it fixed size, so that's a little bit faster. And then I'm going to change some more settings. I'm going to give it 3 processors. I'm going to make the hard disk be the first boot priority. This way, after we're done installing it from the virtual live CD, we can just reboot right into the virtual hard disk. Display, I'm going to crank up the video memory. Graphics controller, I'm going to do VBox VGA so I can have a full screen. And of course, we're going to put our ISO in here. So you see I selected the Elementary OS 5.1 stable. That's the ISO that I downloaded earlier, or that you would have downloaded from the web page earlier. And let's see, just one last check to make sure we got everything set up. Yep, I think we're good. Then we're going to go ahead and start it. And always starts off screen for me. So this is the splash screen that you get when you're booting from your USB, or when you're booting the virtual hard disk if you're doing it as a virtual machine installation. And here you go. And just like most of the Linux distros that come with a graphical install, it's very straightforward, but I'll still walk you through it. So you could try Elementary if you wanted to just boot from the USB and basically use some of the pre-installed applications. Like you should be able to use the web browser and some of the notepads and stuff like that, just so that you can sort of get a feel for how it'll work out. But we're going to actually be installing it. So if you want to do that as well, click on Install Elementary. And it's automatically got my correct keyboard layout selected. And we want to download the updates while installing Elementary. That box is already checked off, and I'm going to also check to install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and additional media formats. You definitely want that so that everything can just work properly on your system. Some of it's proprietary, but again, this is meant for beginner users. We don't want to really force beginner users into the whole free software paradigm because it's a little bit trickier to get stuff working when you don't accept any proprietary software. So yeah, we want to erase disk and install Elementary. You could also go ahead and encrypt if you want to do that, or you can click something else to do a custom partitioning scheme. Then you want to select your time zone. It's got New York selected already, which is mine. Go ahead and put in your username and choose a password. And you can select to log in automatically if you want. Of course, I don't recommend that for any type of multi-user system scenario, or also don't really recommend it for a laptop or any type of device that you're going to take outside. So you want to require your password to log in. And then it's going to start doing its thing. And should only take a few minutes for the installation to complete. The installation is finished. So now we can reboot our VM, or if you install this to hardware, remove your USB stick and then click Restart Now. So this is how Elementary looks when it is first booting up. And the impressiveness of Elementary starts right at the login screen. So since this system can have multiple users, the login manager actually puts a lot of effort into distinguishing them. So it shows us an avatar for our user, which is just this basic blue guy since I haven't actually configured it, but we can change this later. And it also shows the desktop background. So you'll see when I log in that this dock here is actually the wallpaper that the VM is using, or that my desktop is using rather. So when you go to put in your password, it'll also let you know if you have numlock enabled or if you have caps lock enabled. So very good for making sure that you get your password correctly, that it tells you that that's on. All right, and this is what our desktop looks like, and let's actually read this welcome message here since we're going to pretend like we're a new user to Linux. So we can hit next, location services. We have the option of turning that on or off. I guess I'll just leave it on. Nightlight. Okay, so we can add that to make the display warmer at night to prevent eye strain. Let me see, because it is almost 7 o'clock. Can't really tell any difference here. Whatever. We'll just leave it on. I don't think I'll be doing a very long review, but it's also still sunny outside since it's summertime, so I guess it makes sense that it's not quite dimming it just yet. Housekeeping. Oh, okay, so we can automatically delete temporary files or trash files. I would probably do trash files. That's pretty helpful because I'm used to most distros. I think Mint used to be this way, where when you delete files, they didn't actually go to your trash can, but now they have a trash can that they go to. When I delete stuff, I want it to be deleted. You know, I like to live life on the edge. And get some apps. Yeah, that's probably going to be one of the first things that we do. Now let's actually take a moment to just appreciate how clean this desktop layout is. It's sort of like the Mac OS, which I'm not really a fan of the Mac OS per se, but the Mac OS does have a really clean desktop layout, so I'm glad that Elementary has basically done the same. It's obviously not a ripoff of the Mac OS. You can tell that you're not actually on a Mac. I think this is better, really. I like the icon, how the icons look. They're not really minimalist per se, but they're not sort of over-the-top design like you sort of see on more modern Mac systems, where they are sort of just doing too much when they're designing icons. And up here we have an application tray. And you can see that these are all of the applications that we have. So there's really not a lot that Elementary ships with, just the bare necessities to get you started. I guess they do that to save disk space and speed up the installation process. So let's take a look at the App Center. So we can see in our App Center that there are different categories of apps here, as well as a search bar where you can search for an application by its name. One thing that I noticed about this that's a little bit interesting is that the apps actually have an option for you to pay for a lot of them, which is interesting. Now, they're not actually... They don't really cost money. Like, for example, if we tried to do Crypt here, you don't actually have to pay $10 for it. You could do the same thing that we did on the Elementary website and just enter a custom amount of 0, and then it becomes free. But I think that this is a really smart idea in order to get some money for what is essentially free software. I wouldn't be surprised if the Elementary devs earned more money from their Linux distribution than most other devs do from their Linux distributions. Now, Elementary OS does have Flatpak support. So if I was to look for a proprietary software, like let's see if WhatsApp is in here. Probably need to go to, oh, didn't mean to close out of that. Probably need to go to the main screen to try to find it. Okay, they don't have WhatsApp in here. Let's see, do they have Telegram? Yeah, they do have Telegram, so I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the Flatpak for Telegram. So they have that, which is good to put in an OS like this, because again, this is geared more towards newer Linux users, and they're going to be installing a lot of proprietary software. I mean, they're coming from a proprietary OS themselves, right? They're going to be coming from the Mac OS or Windows. And there's some people who I know are really free software enthusiasts who will try to tell people, you know, you really shouldn't use any type of proprietary software. And they do have a point, but we don't want to push them into the deep end of Linux with a, you know, maybe free software approved distro that doesn't allow you to install anything proprietary. Let them use a bit of a mix, right? If most of their software is free and open source, then that's a step in the right direction. But one thing that's interesting to note about Elementary OS is that it doesn't have Snapd support. And that's interesting because Elementary OS is based off of Ubuntu, which does have Snapd support. So I don't know why they would take that out of Elementary OS. It kind of limits the scope of software that's going to be available to this distro. So let's take a look at some of the other applications that come installed on it. So for the browser, you have Epiphany, which I'm a big fan of Firefox, so again, for someone like me, I wouldn't want Epiphany to be my main browser. I don't know for an end user, though, how good this would be, especially someone who's new. It does look like it's a really simple web browser. I don't have a whole lot of support with this browser personally. I can't say that I've ever run it for some significant period of time. I guess it doesn't really have any type of browser add-ons. Let's see. Epiphany add-ons. Yeah, not entirely sure whether or not this supports any add-ons. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't really support Flash by default either. Let's see. Let me see if I can find a link real quick that requires Flash to work to test that on. Yeah, so this browser does not have Flash by default. That's another thing that I think would be good to try to install with the Linux distro once it's done with the initial installation. See if you can build Flash in there too, because I think that's something that a lot of users would want to use. Now, another thing that I'm going to show you with Elementary OS is that it saves where you are in your application when you close it. So in a way, it kind of works more like a mobile operating system. So it doesn't have a minimize, right? It just has, what would this be? The restore button to make it regular size so you can move it around. It has maximize. And it has close, which doesn't actually close it. It just sort of puts it to sleep, right? Just like it does on a mobile platform. I think it does the same thing in a text editor too. Let's see. I don't have the text editor on the dock there. Here we go. Oh, which I guess I'll show you this. So Code, this is their text editor by Elementary OS. Most of these apps too, by the way, are made by the devs. So this isn't a situation that you have with a lot of other distros where the main distro is made by one set of developers and then they pull in software that's made by all these other different developers. No, like almost all of this is made by the devs of Elementary OS. I know that Code is, I think Epiphany is as well. This mail client, this calendar is made by them. Also, the file manager is made by them, but we'll get to that in a second. So in here, let's just type some words in a document, and then I can close this. And then let me open it back up again over here. Let me see, can I add this to my doc? Yeah, let's do that. And you can see that it pulls up my same document here. So this is really good. I know that new users are probably gonna like this a lot. One thing I can imagine is that if you're on a very low RAM system, this might not be great, because obviously if it's putting your apps to sleep instead of killing them, they're going to be using more RAM. Now, on a desktop platform or even a laptop platform these days, that really shouldn't be a problem. You know, I'm not critiquing that in any way. I guess people who are very minimalist and like to have those very low HTOP stats would absolutely hate something like this. But again, that's not the type of people that this OS is meant for. So then we have the file manager, which again, it's really neat, right? It's a really nice looking file manager. This is even something that I would use as far as a GUI file manager goes. The icons look really clean. It's almost like File Explorer in Windows, except it doesn't suck as much. You can also get full paths here like that, which I really, really enjoy. Let's see, can you do a tab view? Oh yeah, you can do a tab view. So already right off the bat, this is better than File Explorer in Windows because it doesn't do that. And let's see, can I view it in different ways? Oh, hang on, does it not do... This is a list view, but... that's not really the type of list view that I like. I guess I could deal with that, but I prefer a list view where it's a list of files and it's like half the size of this, or maybe a third or a fourth the size of this, so you can see more at once. I guess I could live with it, but I'm not really much of a fan of that. So speaking of those HTOP stats, let's see if we can pull it up. All right, Control-Alt-T doesn't work. All right, so it's Super Key plus T to pull up your terminal. I was about to say, if they didn't have a built-in hotkey to pull up the terminal, then that's something I don't like. All right, do we have HTOP by default? We do. And yeah, our HTOP stats are still pretty nice. We're using about 800 megs of RAM. And what do we have backgrounded? We have an Epiphany backgrounded. We have, oh, wait a minute, with it open, is it still under a gig? Oh, that's pretty impressive. All right, so this definitely isn't a very bloated browser. It's definitely pretty lightweight. Let's see what this calendar looks like. Okay, so this is a really clean calendar too. This looks nice. Allow location, sure. Yeah, so this is just how you would put in all of your events for the calendar. Let's look at the music player. Oh wow, I almost thought that this said iTunes for a second. It kind of looks like iTunes, to be honest. Like, this is what I really enjoy about the elementary OS, is it's the type of thing where if you were an IT person supporting a group of people that were using Macs, could you go in with elementary OS on a flash drive and install this to one of their Macs? And how long do you think it would take them to notice that they're not using the Mac OS, they're actually using a Linux distro, right? Like, I've had that experience with Windows and Linux Mint, where I've been able to rice it so that it kind of looks like Windows, and then put it on someone's machine, like one of my grandparents or something, and they'll use it for a couple of months. They don't even realize that they're on Linux, and I'm like, yes, we're expanding the market share. It's wonderful. See, these are the photos. It's kind of odd. This has a dark theme to it. I don't know why it would do that. Videos has it too. Maybe they think that viewing stuff just looks better when it has a dark theme instead of a light theme. I don't really know why. Well, anyway, that's elementary OS. We can do Super L to lock our system. And there you go, we can see our desktop right there. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button and share it with somebody who you think would find the video useful. Also, be sure to subscribe so that you can stay updated when new content comes out.